The first time my neighbor used my driveway to store his fishing boat, I wasn't even home to see it. I was halfway across the world, wearing desert camo, sleeping in a canvas tent, and worrying about things a whole lot bigger than suburban property lines. But the moment I heard about it, I knew two things. One, the guy thought nobody would stop him. And two, he had no idea how stubborn I could be. My name's Daniel Harper. Most people just call me Dan. Back in 2021, I bought a small place just outside a town called Millbrook, Ohio. Not a fancy neighborhood, nothing like that. Just quiet streets, a couple maple trees, and houses that were built sometime in the late 70s when everyone apparently loved brown siding and long driveways. The driveway was the reason I bought the house. It ran straight along the side of the property, long enough to fit my pickup, my work trailer, and still leave room for friends to park when they came over for cookouts. I worked construction when I wasn't on active duty with the Army Reserve, so space mattered to me. Tools, ladders, compressors, that kind of life tends to spread out. When I first moved in, the neighborhood seemed friendly enough. People waved when you drove by. A couple retirees walked their dogs every morning. Across the street lived an older couple named Carl and Linda who brought over a plate of cookies the second week I was there. And next door, on the right side of my house, lived a guy named Russell Pike. Russell was in his early 50s, maybe mid-50s. Tall, always wearing sunglasses even when it wasn't sunny, the kind of guy who talked with a half-smirk like he already knew something you didn't. The first time we met, he leaned on my fence and said, "You the new owner?" I told him yeah. He nodded toward my driveway. "That's a good stretch of concrete. Previous owner never used half of it." I laughed a little. "Well, I probably will." He shrugged like it didn't matter either way. At the time, nothing about that conversation felt important. Just two neighbors making small talk. About 3 months after moving in, I got deployment orders. Nothing dramatic, just a long overseas assignment supporting logistics operations. Still meant I'd be gone close to 8 months. Before I left, I asked my older brother Kyle if he could swing by the house every week or so. Check the mail, start the truck occasionally, make sure nobody tried anything weird. Kyle lives about 20 minutes away, works nights as a paramedic, but he said it wouldn't be a problem. "Relax," he told me. "Your house will still be there when you get back." The first few months overseas went by pretty uneventfully. Long days, a lot of dust, the usual rhythm of deployment life. Then one evening, about 4 months in, my phone buzzed while I was sitting outside the mess tent. It was Kyle. Now, when your brother calls out of the blue while you're deployed, your brain immediately goes somewhere bad. I answered thinking maybe something happened to the house. Instead, he said, "Hey, weird question, do you own a boat?" I remember laughing. "You've known me my whole life. Man, when have I ever owned a boat?" "Okay," he said slowly. "Then why is there one sitting in your driveway?" That got my attention. "What kind of boat?" "Small fishing boat. Aluminum. On a trailer." I pictured my empty driveway in my head, trying to imagine how something like that just appeared. "Maybe one of my friends left it?" I suggested, though even as I said it I knew that didn't make sense. None of my friends had boats either. Kyle said, "That's what I thought at first. But it's been there all week." "All week?" "Yeah. And I drove by again tonight. Still there." Something about that bothered me immediately. A driveway isn't exactly public parking. "Did you see who dropped it off?" I asked. "No," he said. "But I'm going to check your security camera when I get home." I had installed a couple cameras on the garage when I moved in, mostly just habit from being gone for training so often. About an hour later, Kyle called again. And this time he was laughing. Not a normal laugh either. One of those disbelief laughs where someone's watching something ridiculous happen. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "What?" "It's your neighbor." "Which one?" "The guy on the right. Russell." Apparently, the camera footage showed Russell backing a pickup truck with a trailer into my driveway late one night. He unhitched the trailer, left the boat sitting right there, then drove off like it was the most normal thing in the world. For a moment, I didn't even know what to say. "He just parked it there?" I asked. "Yup." "And left?" "Yup." Kyle paused, then added, "You want me to go talk to him?" I thought about it for a second. I didn't like the idea of problems with neighbors, especially when I wasn't even there to handle it. "Yeah," I finally said. "Just be polite. Maybe it's some kind of misunderstanding." The next day, Kyle knocked on Russell's door. According to him, Russell answered holding a beer and looking mildly annoyed at being interrupted. Kyle explained the situation, that the house belonged to his brother, that I was currently deployed with the Army, and that the boat needed to be moved. Russell apparently shrugged. "Oh yeah," he said. "It's just there temporary." Kyle told him the driveway wasn't public property. Russell chuckled and said something that would end up starting this entire mess. "He's not even here," he said. Kyle repeated those words to me over the phone that night, and I remember staring out at the dark desert horizon thinking, that guy just made a mistake. Not a huge mistake, but the kind that tends to grow into one. At the time, Russell did move the boat. Kyle said it was gone the next time he drove past. So I figured the issue was finished before it even started. Turns out, it was only the opening scene. And the real story didn't begin until the day I finally came home. When I finally came home from deployment, the first thing I noticed was how quiet everything felt. You get used to noise overseas. Generators humming, trucks rumbling, people moving around at all hours. Back in Millbrook, the loudest sound on my street most mornings was a lawn mower 2 houses down and Carl's old golden retriever barking at squirrels. It felt good. I spent the first couple days doing the normal things people do when they've been gone a while. Cleaning dust off shelves, checking the truck, throwing out a fridge full of expired food. Kyle came by that weekend, and we grilled burgers in the backyard while he filled me in on the neighborhood gossip I'd missed. At one point he nodded toward the driveway and said, "You know, that boat hasn't been back since I talked to Russell." "Good," I said. "Let's keep it that way." And for about 2 weeks, everything was normal. Then one Saturday morning, I opened my front door with a cup of coffee in my hand and nearly walked straight into an aluminum fishing boat sitting square in the middle of my driveway. Same trailer, same dull gray hull, same exact spot. I just stood there for a few seconds staring at it, like my brain was trying to confirm I wasn't still half asleep. Then I sighed, set my coffee down on the porch rail, and walked next door. Russell's house was one of those places that always looked halfway between tidy and messy. Grass cut, but tools lying around. A pickup truck parked in the yard. Wind chimes clanking against the porch roof. I knocked. A moment later the door opened, and there he was again, sunglasses on even though it was barely 9 in the morning. He looked surprised for about half a second. "Oh," he said. "You're back." "Yeah," I replied calmly. "And so is your boat." He leaned against the doorframe and glanced toward my driveway like it was the first time he'd noticed it. "Right," he said casually. "Just parked it there for a couple days." I kept my voice even. "Russell, that's my driveway." He shrugged. "Yeah, but you've got plenty of space." That was the moment I realized something important about Russell Pike. He didn't think he was doing anything wrong. In his mind, my driveway was just in used real estate. Still, I wasn't interested in starting a neighborhood feud on my first week home. "Look," I said, "I get that storing a boat can be a pain, but you can't leave it there. I need that space." He held my gaze for a second, then sighed dramatically like I was the one being difficult. "Fine," he said. "I'll move it tonight." And to his credit, he did. That evening the trailer was gone. Problem solved. Except the following weekend, it came back. Same place, same boat. Right in the middle of my driveway like it owned the concrete. This time I didn't even bother grabbing coffee. I walked straight across the yard and knocked again. Russell opened the door, and before he could say anything I gestured behind me. "Seriously?" He rubbed the back of his neck and said, "Just for the weekend." "You said that last time." "Yeah, well, marina storage is full. That's not my problem." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he gave that same little half smirk I remembered from when I first moved in. "Relax, man," he said. "It's not hurting anything." Now here's the thing about conflict. Most people assume the first instinct is anger. But honestly, what I felt in that moment wasn't anger. It was clarity. Russell wasn't misunderstanding the situation. He understood perfectly. He just didn't care. So I nodded slowly and said, "Okay." Then I walked back to my house. Russell probably thought he'd won that little argument. What he didn't know was that I had just decided something. I wasn't going to ask him again. The following Monday morning the boat was still sitting in my driveway. So I made a phone call. Now, Millbrook's not a big town, but there's a towing company about 10 minutes away that handles vehicle removals. They deal with everything from broken down cars to abandoned trailers. The dispatcher who answered sounded like she'd been drinking coffee since 5 a.m. "Millbrook Tow, how can I help you?" "Hi," I said. "I've got a trailer parked on private property that doesn't belong to me." She asked for the address and a few details. "Is the trailer blocking access?" she asked. "It's parked in my driveway. Do you want it removed?" I looked out the window at the boat. "Yes," I said simply. She told me someone would be there within the hour. 40 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up. The driver stepped out, took one look at the situation, and chuckled. Neighbor problems? You could say that. He hooked the trailer up in about 3 minutes. Boat, trailer, everything lifted clean off the concrete. As he pulled away down the street, I felt an odd sense of calm. No yelling. No argument. Just problem removed. That evening around 7 p.m., there was a hard knock on my door. I already knew who it was. Russell stood on my porch looking furious. Where's my boat? He demanded. Impound yard, I replied. You had it towed. Yes. You could have warned me. I leaned against the doorframe. Russell, I did warn you. Twice. He stared at me like he couldn't decide whether to shout or storm off. Finally, he said, You're paying those fees. I shook my head. No. You parked it on my property. He muttered something under his breath and walked back across the yard. I figured that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I came home from work and saw something very familiar sitting halfway down my driveway. The boat. Again. This time I didn't knock on his door. I didn't even slow down. I walked inside, grabbed my phone, and called the towing company. When the dispatcher answered, she said, Millbrook Tow. Hey, I said. It's Dan on Maple Ridge Drive again. There was a pause. Then she laughed. Oh, boat guy. Boat guy. All right, she said. We'll send someone out. Removal number 2. The driver that showed up was the same guy from before. He shook his head as he hooked the trailer up. Guy really brought it back? Apparently. Well, he said with a grin. Storage fees just doubled for him. And that's when I realized something interesting. Every time that boat got towed, Russell had to pay 2 separate costs. The towing fee and daily storage at the impound lot, which added up fast. You'd think that would have ended the problem. But Russell Pike was not the kind of man who liked admitting defeat. The 3rd removal happened the following month. Then the 4th. Then the 5th. By the end of that summer, the tow truck had visited my house 5 separate times. Each time Russell paid the fees, picked up his boat, and eventually brought it right back. And somewhere around removal number 6, something strange started happening. The towing dispatcher began recognizing my phone number. One afternoon when I called, she answered with, Boat again? Boat again. She laughed. We're sending Mike. Mike was the driver now. He started treating the whole situation like an ongoing sitcom episode. All right, he'd say, hopping out of the truck. Let's see what Russell left us this week. At one point, Russell tried getting clever. Instead of parking the whole trailer in my driveway, he left it halfway across the line. Half in his yard, half on my concrete. Mike took one look at it and said, Still counts. Hooked it up. Gone. Removals 7 through 13 happened over the next 4 months. By then, the entire street knew about the situation. Carl from across the road once walked over while Mike was loading the boat and said quietly, That man's stubborn. I nodded. So am I. But the moment everything turned from neighborhood annoyance into something almost cinematic came on a Saturday afternoon during removal number 14. Russell had friends visiting. 3 guys standing in his yard with beers, laughing about something. Then the tow truck arrived. And right there, in front of all of them, Mike hooked up the trailer and pulled the boat away. The look on Russell's face was something I'll probably never forget. But the story still wasn't finished. Not even close. Because the next chapter would include winter, a snowstorm, and the most expensive parking mistake Russell Pike would ever make. By the time winter rolled around in Millbrook, the whole boat situation had turned into something people on the street quietly kept track of. Nobody said it out loud, but every time a tow truck rolled down Maple Ridge Drive, curtains shifted a little. Front doors cracked open. Carl would step out onto his porch pretending to check the mail. It had become a thing, and Russell hated that. You could see it in the way he walked now. Quicker, sharper movements, jaw always tight. The smug half-smile he used to wear around the neighborhood had mostly disappeared. But if he thought embarrassment was going to make him stop, he clearly didn't understand the situation any better than he did the first day he parked that boat. Because I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I was just protecting my driveway. Removal number 15 happened in early December. I came home from work, saw the boat sitting there again like an old, unwanted house guest, and just sighed. By then the routine was automatic. Phone out. Dial. Millbrook Tow. The dispatcher answered. Before I could even say anything, she laughed softly and said, Let me guess. Boat again. Boat again. Mike showed up about 30 minutes later wearing a heavy jacket and a knit cap pulled low over his ears. He climbed out of the truck, rubbed his hands together, and looked at the trailer. Man, he said. This guy really loves paying us. Apparently. He hooked it up, lights blinking in the cold air, and pulled it away while a thin layer of snow drifted across the street. Russell didn't come over that night, or the next day, but about 3 weeks later, the boat appeared again. Removal 16, then 17, then 18. At this point, something interesting started happening inside my own head. When the whole thing started, I'll admit part of me was irritated. Nobody likes dealing with petty neighbor drama. But somewhere around removal 10 or 11, that irritation faded. What replaced it was something quieter. Patience. Because Russell had created a system without realizing it. Every time he parked the boat there, it left. Every time it left, he paid for it. I didn't have to argue. I didn't have to threaten. I just made a phone call. And systems, they're powerful things. Removal 19 happened right after Christmas. Removal 20 came in mid-January. By now, Mike and I barely needed to talk. He'd pull up, shake his head, and say something like, "Same boat, different week." And I'd reply, "You know the drill." But the moment that really sealed the entire story happened during removal number 21. That week a snowstorm rolled through Ohio. Not a light dusting either. One of those heavy lake-effect storms that dumps thick snow for hours. The kind that turns every road into slush and makes people stay inside if they have any sense at all. That morning I woke up, looked out my front window, and there it was. The boat, half buried in snow. Russell had apparently decided that bad weather meant no tow trucks would come out. Honestly, I almost admired the creativity. Almost. I grabbed my phone. Millbrook Tow, the dispatcher answered. "Morning," I said. "Boat again." There was a short pause. "You're kidding." "Nope." She laughed. "All right, hang tight. Mike might take a little longer today. Roads are rough." About an hour later, I heard the deep rumble of a diesel engine coming down the street. Through the falling snow, Mike's tow truck crawled around the corner like some stubborn metal animal refusing to quit. He stepped out, looked at the snow-covered trailer, and let out a long whistle. "Guy thought we wouldn't show up, didn't he?" "Probably." Mike grinned. "Bad bet." It took him a little longer to hook it up because the tires were half frozen into the snow, but eventually the trailer lifted, the chains tightened, and the boat rolled away yet again. Snow swirling around the red brake lights as the truck disappeared down the street. That was removal 21. Removal 22 happened about 3 weeks later. At this point, Russell didn't even bother knocking on my door anymore when it got towed. The anger had been replaced with something else. Resignation. The final removal, number 23, happened near the end of February. I remember that day pretty clearly. The sky was gray, the kind of dull winter afternoon where everything feels a little quiet. I was inside working on some paperwork when I heard the familiar rumble outside. I looked out the window. Mike was already there. He waved. I waved back. No phone call needed that time. Someone else on the street must have spotted the boat first. 10 minutes later, it was gone again. And that was the last time it ever appeared in my driveway. But the story didn't actually end that day. About a month later, I came home from work and saw something unusual next door. A construction crew. 2 pickup trucks, a small excavator, stacks of gravel piled along Russell's yard. For 2 days, they worked nonstop. Digging, leveling, pouring fresh concrete. By the third morning, a brand new driveway stretched along the side of Russell's house. Long, wide, plenty of space for a truck and a boat trailer. Probably cost him several $1,000s. The first time I saw his boat parked there, sitting perfectly on his own property, I just leaned against my truck and laughed quietly. Problem solved. It's been almost a year now. The boat has never touched my driveway again. Russell and I don't talk much these days. We're not enemies exactly, but we're not neighbors who borrow sugar either. Mostly we just nod if we pass each other while getting the mail. And honestly, that's fine with me. Because sometimes the best kind of victory isn't loud. It's just consistent. No shouting. No revenge. Just letting someone pay the price of their own decisions over and over until they finally decide to stop. Now here's the part I'm curious about. If you were in my position, how many times would you have called the tow company? Would you have stopped after the first warning? The 5th tow? The 10th? Or would you have done exactly what I did and let the system run its course all the way to 23? I want to hear what you think. Drop your answer in the comments, and be honest. Because neighborhood disputes like this happen everywhere, and everyone seems to have a different idea of where patience ends and where justice begins. And if you enjoyed the story, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, I've got a few more real-life neighborhood stories that are just as wild as this one.